I was halfway through a mug of lukewarm CAF when the deep-range scanner chimed. A single ping, sharp, almost embarrassed to be there, appeared on my display. At first, I thought it was phantom noise, the kind you get after too many hours staring into the dark. Space is full of ghosts, dead satellites, drifting wreckage, debris that the void forgot to claim. Most of it comes and goes without notice. But this didn't fade. It held steady. It was coming closer. "Control," I called into the comm, "you're gonna want to see this." Within moments, the observation deck of Station Klyros was crowded. Officers, sensor techs, even Captain Diran himself, all staring at the point of light growing on the hollow. The ESS Horizon. A name I hadn't heard in years. A ship declared lost 97 years ago. It had been humanity's pride, the first to attempt the Veil crossing, the dangerous subspace corridor no one had ever returned from. Every empire had placed bets on how far they'd get before they burned out. None expected them to survive. They didn't. Or so we thought. Now, the horizon was sliding into real space just outside the station's perimeter. No escort. No warning. No beacon. I expected a battered wreck, scarred, pitted, maybe barely holding together after decades adrift. Instead, it was beautiful. Too beautiful. The hull shimmered like liquid mercury under starlight, flowing with patterns that didn't repeat, as if the metal was thinking. Our scanners couldn't lock onto it. Every reading came back null, wrong in ways our instruments didn't even have error codes for. "Sir," one of the techs said, voice shaking, this thing has no mass signature. It's not physically here." The captain frowned. "Then why can we see it?" No one had an answer. We sent hails. All bands. All protocols. No reply. The horizon just drifted closer, slow and deliberate, like it was gliding on invisible rails. Then, without warning, every channel lit up at once. A single human voice, calm, unhurried, like they'd just stepped out for groceries, cut through. "We've been to the other side. They gave us something to bring back. No identifiers. No captain's name. Just that message." By then, every empire's long-range surveillance had spotted them. We could feel the galaxy tightening around us. Ships would be coming. Fleets. Scientists. Warmongers. The kind who'd burn 100 planets to get a taste of whatever the horizon carried. But none of them would get here first. We were already inside its shadow. When the horizon finally docked, we gathered at the umbilical bay. A hatch cycled open with a hiss that didn't sound like any pressure seal I'd heard before, more like a sigh. The first crew member stepped through. They were human, mostly. The face looked right. The eyes, not so much. Pupils thin and silver, shifting like oil on water. They blinked slowly, as though remembering how. Captain Diran tried to speak, protocol demanded a formal welcome, but the figure simply raised a hand. "Not here," they said. Their voice had harmonics under it, faint but impossible to ignore, like a choir singing at the edge of hearing. "This place isn't safe for what we carry." Behind them, the rest of the crew emerged. 8 in total. Records said the horizon had launched with 23. No one asked where the others had gone. We escorted them to the conference chamber. Or tried to. Halfway down the corridor, the walls changed. Not melted. Not shifted. Just different. The steel became smooth black stone. Light stopped reflecting. My own shadow disappeared. The security cams showed nothing but static. When it passed, everything was back to normal. The crew acted like nothing had happened. The debrief should have been simple. "Where have you been? How did you return? What's on your ship?" Instead, we got fragments. We crossed the veil. It's not distance that kills you, it's time. They needed a way to anchor themselves here. They chose us. Every answer only deepened the unease. The real trouble came when the captain ordered a boarding inspection. We sent drones first. The horizon swallowed them. Not destroyed, swallowed. The feed cut to black, but telemetry said they were still transmitting from somewhere, just not here. So we sent a boarding team. They stepped through the airlock and stepped right back out again from a hatch on the other side of the station. No corridors in between. No traversal time. By now, half the crew was whispering about dimensional bleed, others about non-Euclidean displacement. I didn't care about the terms. I cared about the look in the boarders' eyes when they came back. They wouldn't speak. One of them wouldn't stop smiling. Word spread fast. Within 6 hours, 3 separate empires had ships en route. Within 12, the Union War Council had sent a classified directive, secure the horizon at all costs. But it was too late. The ship undocked on its own. No engine burn, no thruster flare, just gone, like it had been erased. Moments later, it reappeared 0.3 light-years away, drifting serenely as if nothing had happened. The silver-eyed human's voice returned over the comms. "You'll see us again when the others arrive. Keep your skies clear." Captain Diran slammed his fist on the console. Others? What others? The comms went dead. That was 3 days ago. Since then, the stars near the veil have begun flickering. Whole constellations shift when you're not looking. Instruments fail, then work again with readings that make no sense. And last night, while I was alone in the scanner room, I swear I saw the horizon shape against the void just for a second. Not close. Not far. Just there. I think they're waiting. I think whatever gift they brought back isn't for us at all. And God's help us when the ones they're waiting for finally get here. The Galactic Concord Chamber was never silent. Not when empires gathered here. Not when the stakes were small. And especially not today. The meeting had been called an emergency session, an event so rare that some council members had traveled faster than their own aides could follow. Delegates of the 8 great empires sat in a ring of polished obsidian, the air thick with the scent of heated metal and the acrid bite of alien pheromones. In the center of the chamber hung the holoscreen. On it hovered an image that had already shaken the balance of the galaxy, the ESS Dawnspire. 53 years earlier, the Dawnspire had been the pride of Earth's fleet, an exploration vessel designed for deep space mapping beyond the galactic rim. It had vanished on its maiden voyage into the Shattered Veil, a corridor of fractured spacetime so unstable that even the most advanced navigators of the Koresh Empire had declared it a death trap. Now, without warning, it had appeared in the neutral corridor, the most heavily monitored stretch of space in Concord territory. No escort. No signal. No explanation. Fleet Admiral Arashek of the Dravathi Dominion stood before the holoscreen, his scaled hands folded behind his back. His voice was low but carried across the chamber. This is no longer human technology. The footage began to roll. First, the Dawnspire drifted serenely toward a blockade line established by the Azari hegemony. 6 cruisers moved to intercept standard protocol for any unidentified vessel in the corridor. The human ship did not slow. Then, without thrust, without any visible propulsion, it vanished only to reappear behind the cruisers a fraction of a second later. No warp flash. No hyperspace wake. Just there, then here. Seconds later, the Azari ships began to tear apart, not explode, not burn, just crumble into drifting metal husks as though decades of corrosion had happened in a blink. There were no energy readings. No weapons signatures. The Dawnspire hadn't even powered its shields. In the chamber, whispers began to ripple. The Valari delegates' frilled head tendrils flared in alarm. Is this some hidden Earth project? The human ambassador, a gray-haired woman named Mara Kale, sat very still. We have no record of this vessel returning to our territory, she said evenly. We only know what you know. It was a lie. Everyone could smell it. Arashek continued the briefing. Our probes attempted to scan the vessel. Every sensor feed collapsed into recursive errors. The ship's mass signature fluctuates between measurable values and nothing. As though it is alternately present and absent from our dimension. The holoscreen shifted to a new set of images, interior drone footage. The first corridor looked normal for an exploration ship, white panels, soft lighting, control rails along the walls. But halfway through, the footage began to fold. The walls bent inward until the corridor became a perfect circle. Then the camera turned left and found itself in the same corridor, from the opposite direction, without ever moving forward. In another room, a crew quarters window looked out on a starfield no one could identify, one with constellations and gas clouds that did not exist in known space. When the drone pulled back, the same window now looked out onto the neutral corridor again. The crew, if they could be called that, were human in shape, but their eyes reflected light in ways no biological lens could. They moved in perfect unison. The recording ended. No one spoke for several breaths. Then the Azari warlord slammed a clawed fist on the table. "If Earth refuses to surrender this vessel, we will take it by force." Ambassador Kale's voice was soft, but it cut through the noise. "You think you can take it?" The chamber erupted into overlapping threats, demands, and accusations. The Concord's speaker pounded his staff for order, but the chaos was already spilling over. Beyond the council chamber, fleets were mobilizing. The Valari sent 6 dreadnoughts to shadow the Dawnspire from a distance. The Azari brought in siege frigates. Even the cautious Kestran syndicate dispatched stealth corvettes, hoping to claim a piece of whatever the humans had found or built. But the Dawnspire didn't seem to notice the predators circling. It wandered through the corridor like a shark that had forgotten how to hunt, or perhaps one that had never considered the smaller fish worth eating. On the third day, the impossible happened again. The ship split. Without distortion, without light, without warning, it became 3 Dawnspires. Each one moved independently, vanishing and reappearing across hundreds of kilometers as if the space between points didn't exist for them. One passed directly through a Valari dreadnought. The ship didn't explode, it simply ceased to function. Power, life support, comms, all gone. It drifted dark into the void. Another slipped into the gravity well of a nearby planetoid and emerged seconds later above the Concorde's relay station on the opposite side of the system. The last simply faded away. No one knew where. In the Concorde chamber, panic was no longer theoretical. If humanity had even one more ship like the Dawnspire, the galaxy's balance of power was gone. Admiral Arashek put it plainly. This is no longer an arms race. This is survival. Whatever they found beyond the veil, it is not ours to match. It is ours to hide from. But the human ambassador said nothing. She simply watched the holoscreen as the Dawnspire continued its strange, aimless journey, vanishing, reappearing, splitting like it was testing the limits of reality itself. No one knew the truth. No one except the crew of the Dawnspire. And they weren't speaking. Captain Ilara Vance had no idea how long she'd been gone. Her ship's chronometers told her it had been 2 years since the ESS Peregrine vanished into the gravitational maelstrom of the dead sector. 2 years since her crew last saw the familiar light of known stars. But when the Peregrine emerged, calm, unhurried, into the trade lanes of the Aurealis belt, the comms told her otherwise. 148 years had passed outside. From the bridge of the Arvani flagship Vorolf, High Scholar Draylen watched the human vessel glide into view. His species had kept meticulous records for centuries, and the Peregrine's name was only a footnote in ancient archives, an ambitious exploration ship that had been swallowed by a collapsing singularity. It should have been vaporized. Yet here it was. Its hull was covered in alien sigils, etched deep into the metal in patterns no language core could translate. The symbols shifted subtly when you weren't looking directly at them. The engines emitted no radiation, no thrust, yet the ship moved with precision, adjusting its course in silent defiance of physics. Ilara stood at the forward viewport, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. The crew she commanded had changed. They still looked human, faces familiar, voices recognizable, but their movements were too synchronized. No one stumbled. No one hesitated. They breathed slowly, deliberately. And then there were their eyes. Every crew member's irises were faintly luminescent, threads of silver running through them like veins of metal. The Aurealis Belt's patrols demanded the ship halt for inspection. Ilara's answer was calm, almost gentle. Negative. We are carrying something that must not be touched. No threats. No hostility. Just certainty. The first boarding party never returned. The airlock cycled open for them, then closed behind them without a sound. Hours later, sensors detected them still on board, deep inside the Peregrine's interior. Yet no matter how the boarders moved, their location never changed on the scanners. It was as if they were walking in circles that bent in ways the mind refused to picture. The Arvani were the first to notice the windows. From one viewport, the crew looked out onto a vast green nebula unknown to any chart. Minutes later, from the same window, they saw the blazing heart of a star cluster thousands of light-years away. The stars shifted like scenes in a play. Draylen had seen many strange things in his centuries of scholarship, but this was wrong in a way that felt ancient. He leaned closer to the viewport of his own ship, watching the Peregrine drift closer. "It is not a vessel," he whispered to himself. "It is a seed." The Peregrine transmitted a single data burst to the Aurealis traffic control. It wasn't a request for docking. It wasn't coordinates or flight plans. It was an image. A black expanse filled with towers of living light, each one swaying like grass in the wind. Between them moved shapes that could not be measured, giants of translucent geometry, their bodies folding and unfolding in impossible ways. The image lasted 3 seconds. Then the Peregrine's engines, if they could be called that, flared with a light so pure it burned sensor lenses. Ilara turned to her helmsman. "They're already here." On the Voralf, Draylen felt it before he saw it. A pressure, not on his body but on his thoughts, like someone gently pressing on the inside of his skull. The stars began to bend. Pinpricks of light shifted, their positions warping until constellations dissolved into spirals. Whole sectors of space disappeared from view, replaced by blankness, then by other stars that didn't belong. The Peregrine was no longer moving through space. It was pulling space toward itself. When the second boarding party attempted to breach, they found the ship's hull soft, like the skin of some great living thing. Their cutting torches slid through without resistance, but when they stepped inside, the opening behind them closed as though it had never been there. Inside, they reported hearing voices, not from their comms, not from the crew, but from the walls themselves. Some swore they saw faces moving just under the metal surface. Ilara finally opened a channel to all listening ships. Her voice carried none of the strain of someone facing a fleet's worth of weapons. "We were chosen to return," she said. "Not for your sake. For theirs." No one knew who they were. The Concord ordered the Peregrine seized. The Arvani threatened to destroy it. The Valari offered a temporary alliance with the humans in exchange for whatever was inside. Ilara ignored them all. Her helmsman, whose name was once Lieutenant Aaron Voss, stood at her side and placed a hand on the console. The deck beneath them pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The Peregrine unfolded. That's the only word for it. Panels became planes, planes became voids, and the ship expanded without moving, its shape impossible to fully comprehend. Through the gaps, the giants from the image stepped into view, no longer distant, no longer still. They reached into the physical world with limbs made of light and shadow. Panic erupted across every channel. The Arvani flagship fired. The energy beams struck the Peregrine's hull and simply vanished. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Just gone. The Valari dreadnoughts tried to retreat, but the stars around them shifted again, and suddenly they were back in the same position, as if no movement had occurred. Draylen stood frozen, his quills bristling. He had no words for what he was seeing. Not gods. Not machines. Something older. Something that had simply decided to notice them. Ilara's voice returned one last time. "You've mapped your galaxy well. But there are places your maps can't go. We've been there. We brought them back. They are going to grow here now." The light from the Peregrine's hull intensified, drowning out the stars, drowning out the fleet, drowning out everything. When it faded, the ship was gone. So were the giants. So was the section of space where they had stood. In its place was nothing but darkness. The Concord later declared the area off limits. Patrols reported strange readings near the boundary, heartbeat rhythms in the static, whispers in the void. But Draylen knew better. Seeds grow in silence. And whatever the peregrine had planted would not stay silent forever.